You're late to your lesson and you didn't practice. Typical. But it's okay, Professor Murr's here to help you out. Today we're going to cover some of the basics of music, the fundamentals of music, triads. They're the building blocks of harmony, and today we're going to dig into the major triads in 3 different positions that we can play them in across the neck. Get your guitar and let's get to it. So I'm going to assume you already know a few things, like what a scale is and what a triad is, but if you don't, here's a quick lesson. Let's take the scale C major, the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, and B, and we'll pick any one of those notes or scale degrees, and we'll pick the first degree or the tonic just to make it easy, which is C, and we'll stack thirds to build a triad, which really just means we'll skip a note. So we'll start on C, we'll skip D, go to E, and from E we'll skip F and go to G, and then you get your 3 notes of your triad, which is C, E, and G. And then that makes C major, C, E, G, and you can keep playing that, as many octaves as you're able to. Let's move on. So there's 3 positions that we'll work through, and we'll start with the first. Now these aren't the only places you can play these triads, but these are 3 places where you can play them as 3-note voicings very easily, or single notes. So let's check out the first position. Our first shape is a root position triad, C, E, G, and it sounds like this. C, E, G. And then all we're going to do is take our highest note and drop it down an octave. So this G is going to go to this G, and here's our new shape. Now we have a second inversion, G, C, E. And we'll do the same thing. We end up in first inversion with E, G, C. And then we're back to root position with C, E, G. And you can play them as 3-note voicings or single notes. Now let's move on to the next position. So our second position starts in a first inversion. So we have E as the lowest note, or in the bass. So we have E, G, C. There's our first shape. Our second shape is C, E, G, root position. Next shape is second inversion, G, C, E. And then our last shape is back to first inversion with this E, G, C. And if you notice, whatever inversion we start on, we'll also end on. Let's move on to the last position. Here's our last position, and this starts in a second inversion. And here's what the first shape looks like. G, C, E. And then we'll be in first inversion, E, G, C. And then we'll be in root position, C, E, G. And we're back to second inversion with G, C, E. Now let's talk about some ways we can practice these triads and why they're useful. Now let's go over some ways we can practice these triads. You can just play them in position, which is what you should do at first. You can play them as single notes as well. Or you can also learn where all the roots are for each of these shapes, so it's easy to transpose them, right? For this shape, our root is right here, C. So if we want to make that an E major, we just move this C up to an E and play that same shape. There's our E major. For this shape, it's in the middle now. There's our C. So if we want to play E major, we move that over here. And that'll work with any shape. We can try this one. The root's at the top. C major, A major, G major, E major. So learn where the roots are in these shapes and you'll be able to easily transpose them. So are these triads important, and are they worth your time practicing? I think so. They're the building blocks of harmony, of chords. When you play a C major, or you hear a C major, the notes that are going to sound the most consonant are C, E, and G, the notes of the triad. You can hear those notes sit in and fit in really well with that chord because they're the notes that are in the actual chord. So when you hear people say things like play the changes, this is kind of where you start to develop that way of playing, to play the changes, by learning the notes of the chords. Have fun practicing, hit the shed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. We'll continue with minor triads.